Hi, shalom, everyone. This is Rabbi Shapiro. I just muted everyone, though you have the ability to unmute yourself. But I'm going to ask that you don't use that ability until we open it up for speakers, which will happen towards the end of the ceremony today. Anyone who wants to share thoughts, and in that way it will be a memorial service as well as a shiva, where we can process and just remember, share loving memories of Paul. So we're going to begin now. I'm going to begin with the 23rd Psalm. Mizmor leDavid.
No, I'm good.
Adonai Eloi lo echzor.
The dogs are in the crate.
They're mad. They're back there howling.
Nafshi shoyvet, nafshi shoyvet, yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech v'getz al mahaves. Lo yirara ki ata imadi shiftecha umishantecha shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamoni Taroch lefonai shulchan, taroch lefonai shulchan, taroch lefonai shulchan, neged zorerai, dishanto b'shemen roshi, dishanto b'shemen roshi. Dishanto b'shemen roshi kosirevaya ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai Veshavti bebeis Adonai, Veshavti bebeis Hashem, liorech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, and he leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul, and he guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. So even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because I know you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me, and you've prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, and my cup did overflow. So surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. This psalm, which is said at every funeral, summarizes a point of view of life that has carried the Jewish people on through the centuries, through the millennia, which is that life is so beautiful and it's a gift from God, and that even when things are difficult, even though we know that we all have an inevitable end, we don't get down, we don't lose hope, and we don't become nihilistic about our lives. We don't think, what does it matter anyways? But rather we embrace everything that is good, and we embrace the idea that God walks with us. And for some people, that's a faith that is, old school religious faith of really believing in God, a monotheistic God that's always carrying them. And others, and I think like Paul, who was the religious one in the family, but he walked with God without even talking about God. Right? That's really what the psalm is talking about. You don't have to know God to walk with God, to feel that life matters, that kindness matters, that your ideals matter, even when you're hit right in the face with the difficulties of life. That's when your faith shows. And you can talk about God all day, but at the end of the day, it's the kindness that you show, the goodness, the way you carry yourself. And Paul, for so many in his circle, the circle of this family, absolutely represents that. And so his loss is a terrible loss for all of us. We're saddened that we're no longer going to hear his voice or see his face, though we will in our minds and in our hearts. That will never be lost. And so we have a mixture of sadness and joy. Great sadness that he's gone, but joy in the life that he lived and the memories that he gave us as gifts. And so there's a blessing, an ancient tradition to make a blessing at this time, which I ask everyone to make with me. It's a blessing that thanks God even amidst the loss. That even at this moment, the meaningful life that Paul lived is going to be continued through us, even in sadness. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam dayan ha'emes, which means, blessed are you, O God, creator of this beautiful world, who has given us life and who is righteous and good, even in the difficult times, even in judgment. There are 77 people on this Zoom, and you know how people work. There's probably going to be 100 by the end. But you should know that each of you, everyone who's here, you're giving great honor to Paul. And you should, at least tradition would tell us, that his presence is here with us, that his presence is comforted and grateful that we care, grateful to hear words of love and dedication. And so to honor him, there's no one who could truly tell his life story fully. A book would have to be written. But just to give him honor and love and show our appreciation, we're going to share some words. So I ask that his beloved niece, Lonnie, unmute herself, and she will share some words about her uncle.
Hello, everyone. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right, here goes. My Uncle Paul was such a deeply good person that it is hard to convey just how good he was in a eulogy, but I will try. He was so giving that his loved ones sometimes worried that he gave too much and told him that he was too kind, but he persisted in being incredibly generous regardless. Uncle Paul was someone who people called for help when they were in trouble, and he was always eager to assist those in need. Uncle Paul devoted his career to public service at the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and in his spare time, he frequently volunteered for charities. Even after he retired, my uncle continued to devote time, money, and energy to service projects. His compassion for others is particularly remarkable if you consider how much pain he endured due to difficult circumstances outside of his control, such as the shock of his wife's NF diagnosis, the horror of watching her suffer with that disease, and the grief that came after her death. His trauma and disappointment must have been immense, but he rarely complained about his hardships. Despite the adversity he faced, my uncle went out of his way to make others happy. He enjoyed cooking meals for others and entertaining people, and he routinely gave extraordinary presents to loved ones. For instance, he took my mother on a cruise to Europe, a trip which she thoroughly enjoyed and which left her with many happy memories. On special occasions, my uncle wrote sweet and eloquent notes, which displayed both his flair for writing and his affectionate nature. When my siblings and I were little, he was our Moishe Kringle, the Jewish version of Santa Claus. During the holiday season, he would present us with an astonishing number of gifts, and he would leave us lengthy letters encouraging us to become better versions of ourselves. Uncle Paul radiated warmth wherever he went, and he had a tremendous amount of empathy. He knew how to make others feel appreciated, which may explain why he had so many close friends. It would have been understandable, given how much my uncle suffered, if he had become bitter and angry, but he was as sweet as a person could possibly be. My uncle heaped praise upon friends, family, and acquaintances. He was a super uncle who adored his nephews and nieces. No one celebrated the good fortune of others more enthusiastically than my Uncle Paul, a person who, in so many ways, had been profoundly unlucky. My uncle coped with diabetes, obesity, and depression for many years. And toward the end of his life, he had a stroke that left him with a brain injury. The injury made it harder for my uncle to express himself since he was unable to recall certain words. And this upset him since he was a social individual who loved talking to people. For most of his life, my uncle had been a magnificent communicator and a tremendous storyteller. He was a wordsmith who liked to dazzle others with his words, so the diminishment of those verbal talents was hard for him to bear. Yet even when his gift of gab was slightly lessened, he was joyful when he received phone calls from family and friends, and he took pleasure in connecting with others. Nearly every time I called my uncle while he was staying in an assisted living facility, he effusively thanked me, asked me lots of questions about how I was doing, and reminded me to check on someone else in our family. When he talked about himself, the focus of the conversation was typically on his relationships with others. My uncle was a people person, and his friendliness was evident in nearly every aspect of his life. Uncle Paul's grace and humanity in the face of adversity was tremendous. This was a man who had been tested by life repeatedly, and he passed every test resoundingly. His big heart did not shrink because of his hurt. It grew bigger. He was a spirited and affectionate man who showered love on others in a way that is rare. He did the right thing, even when doing so was challenging. His gallantry and devotion toward my Aunt Helen during her illness embodies the principle embedded in traditional marriage vows that instructs newlyweds to stand by each other in good times and bad, in sickness and in health. My uncle's advocacy for NF research and his extensive support for individuals with NF after her death not only demonstrates my uncle's deep love for my aunt, but also showcases his commitment to the welfare of humanity in general. My 6'2" uncle was gentle, sensitive, and approachable in a society where men are often discouraged from being that way. He was unique, wonderful, and unforgettable, and I will miss him dearly. Uncle Paul left a legacy of kindness. So I think one way we can honor that legacy is by being as emphatically kind as he was. Do something sweet in my uncle's memory. Try to make others smile. While few of us could be quite as selfless as my uncle was, we can still attempt to be as magnanimous as he would be. Let the light that he brought into the world inspire you to shine your light on others. Love intensely and do the good that he would do if he were here. Take the love he gave you and lean upon it as a source of comfort and strength. Know that he would hug you if he could. My uncle was, is, and will always be one of my heroes. And hopefully he can serve that role for you too. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Lonnie. And I want to now invite Lisa to share some words about her beloved uncle.
I can't say too much, but we all loved what we called our wonderful favorite Uncle Paul very much, and I don't think I can say anything else. Sorry. Can we open it up to other people, please?
Absolutely. But that just, shows how deep this love is. Really deep for a niece to care about her uncle like that. Beautiful. We mourn, as I said, we're more so here to honor and to celebrate the life of your brother, of your uncle, of a family member, and a dear friend to so many, Paul Mendelsohn, Chaim, son of Sidney. The world lost a holy soul when Paul left this world. And I don't throw around the word tzaddik, a Hebrew word meaning a highly righteous person, but I will freely refer to Paul as a tzaddik. There was not a mean bone in his body. He had a beautiful smile and a hearty laugh that was contagious. When there was the potential for fighting and disagreement, it was Paul who would minimize the tension. He brought peace with him wherever he went. He saw the best in everyone, and he respected all human beings. He almost never complained or brought negativity with him, but rather he epitomized the positive mentality of seeing life's cup half full. Everyone looked up to Paul, literally. He was a gentle giant at 6'2". He was a real person, someone that you wouldn't forget because he was so real. And as much as people remembered him, he remembered them, their names, their stories, because he truly cared. When he asked how you were doing, he wasn't just saying that to be polite. He truly cared, and he wanted to know how you were. Paul supported everyone around him, and he helped so many strangers who quickly became his friends. He helped heal the bodies and the hearts of those who were suffering from illness, and he saw the world around him in a beautiful way. Perhaps this is why he was known for his storytelling, which could border on tall tales, and he could get you to believe what he said. It's because he believed himself. His embellishment was an extension of his love and joy for life and his ability to find a laugh wherever he looked. He wanted to squeeze every drop of existence and experience out of life, and he was a person who tried everything at least once. He was blessed to be loved by all. The Torah teaches that there are many crowns in life, the crown of wealth, the crown of honor. But of all the crowns, the crown of a good name is the greatest of all. And Paul Mendelsohn has an untouched name. He was born in Philadelphia to Sidney and Trudy Mendelsohn on April 18th, 1948, just a month older than the state of Israel. His family soon moved to Silver Spring, Maryland, where he grew up with his beloved siblings, Nina, Bruce, and Alan. Sydney and Trudy were devoted parents who taught them good values and to think independently. Each of their children took a strong and successful, distinct path in life. And I think that success, at least some of that success, should be attributed to your parents. When you married David, Debbie, and Kathy, Paul became the loving brother-in-law who could make your spouses laugh, sometimes roll their eyes, and he was larger than life. Paul attended University of Maryland in the late 1960s, which must have been a whole lot of fun. And that is where he met his beloved wife, Helen. Helen quickly got to know Paul's family because she came to stay with them during the campus protests that broke out. In 1971, the two of them were married. They had a sweet, loving marriage. Helen was diagnosed with neurofibromatosis and suffered through a long illness. Paul was a deeply devoted husband throughout. He learned sign language when she lost her hearing as the disease progressed. He took gourmet cooking lessons so that when she lost other senses, he could serve and delight one of the senses that was left, one of the few ways that she could enjoy. He was there for her every need. Helen and Paul became activists to promote the awareness and options for people with NF, even testifying before Congress. When Helen passed in 1994, Paul was left with a broken heart. But as you heard, he didn't waste his time being bitter. Rather, he devoted himself even more fully to the NF cause, and he continued as an activist. He was a founding member of the Neurofibromatosis Network and continued supporting NF charities for the rest of his life. He spent tireless hours helping families with NF access medical services and health insurance, and he made sure that children with NF could go to camp. He raised money for camper scholarships. And most beautifully, he became a mentor for many young people suffering from neurofibromatosis. He'd do whatever he could to support them emotionally, not fixing their situation. There was no way to do that, but he would listen to them. He would be a listening ear and a mentor when they needed. Paul was always looking for ways to serve the community and help others. If you needed a ride, he'd give you a ride. If you were lonely, he was there to talk to. Kindness was the core value of his soul. He was smart and a hard worker. He spent his 34-year career at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in Rockville and in Baltimore, after which he continued to consult on disabilities and health insurance issues. When he retired to Boynton Beach, Florida, he didn't slow down. He organized a travel group that went on European tours. He loved to travel, and he actually became a licensed travel agent. As much as he loved to travel, he also loved the joy of showing the world and its beauty to others. And that's the real reason why he organized these trips. And Nina has wonderful memories of the time she accompanied Paul on one of those European adventures. In Florida, Paul also reconnected with his love of acting, performing in community theater. Since high school, Paul had acted in plays and musicals. He loved acting, but the main reason he was involved in theater was the little-known fact that theater people are usually the most fun people to hang out with. He had many good friends down in Florida, including the 12 ladies who used to refer to themselves as Paul's harem. With all these and other wonderful life accomplishments, we could have said the famous refrain from the Passover Seder, Dayenu. It would have been enough. It would have been enough to say, Paul, you did a great job. You accomplished your mission. Your soul was sent into this world to do something, and you did it with flying colors. We should appreciate and give thanks for your kindness and dedication to the cause of good. But that's not it. That's not Dayenu. There's more, and I've saved the best for last. Paul was so incredibly dedicated and loyal to his family and his friends. Each of you were truly special to him, and having him in your life made your life more happy and full. I'm not just saying this to be nice. Paul was adored by his family. Everyone felt close to him. He was the glue that tied the whole large family together. And it was Paul who maintained close contact and friendship with the cousins in Texas. To his nephews, Scott, Andrew, Daniel, and Jonathan, and to his nieces, Ricky, Lana, and Lisa, Paul was your super uncle. He was always there for you, remembering your birthdays and being together with you for happy occasions. He loved giving you gifts, sometimes gifts that your parents thought were too big or too generous, but you guys didn't mind. It was part of what made him so different and special. Though he was your uncle, I think you'd agree that he played a role much larger than the word uncle usually connotes. Because he had no children of his own, rather than waste his energy on regret, he doubled down on his devotion to connecting with you, and all of your lives were better for it. He loved the simple things, hanging out, watching TV with you, and he taught you how to act by his example. For instance, whenever you called him, he'd always thank you for your call, appreciating that you took the time to think of him. And often, he'd then remind you to call someone else who could use a call. Like he said to Lonnie the night before he passed, "Thanks for calling me. Why don't you call and say hi to your brother?" Mitzvah goreres mitzvah, we're taught in the Torah. One good deed leads to another good deed. Nothing is isolated. And in other words, pay it forward. Create good, and it will spread like the ripples on a lake. He was a mentor to each of you in your own way. And I know that sometime soon there will be children walking around carrying Paul's name forward. He loved to cook and to feed you delicious food. In these last years, often instead of his aides helping and cooking for him, he'd be helping and cooking for his aides. His brother told the story of how he came to not too long after a back surgery, when Paul had back surgery, with the goal of helping him. But it was Paul who cooked a banquet for his brother. It reminds me of the biblical story of Abraham, the true founder of kindness in the Jewish religion, who had a circumcision at a very advanced age. And 3 days after his circumcision, you can imagine how it felt, but he saw people wandering through the desert. He jumped up and he ran to them and said, "Please, please be my guests. Let me feed you." That was the same energy that was in Paul. He was like a modern Abraham. And so it's a tremendous loss for the world, for all of us. But we are so grateful for the man he was and the life he lived. That will always stay with us. And Paul, we promise to remember you and have you in our heart when we think about the difficult things and the good things. When we live each day, your breath, your fire is in us. And so we bless you, just as you are a tremendous blessing to the world around you, to your community. We bless you. May you rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. I'm going to honor him with the memorial prayer. El Mole Rachamim Shechein Amramim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachas Kanfei Hashchina B'Malois Kedoshim U'Tehorim Kizohar harakia masiri. Es nishmas Chaim ben Sidney sheholach liolamo began Eden tehem menuchaso ana bal harachamim hastirehu b'seiser kenafecha leolamim utzror bitzror hachayim es nishmaso Adonai hu nachalaso yanuach b'shalom al mishkabo v'nomar amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among all the souls of our loved ones, the souls of the holy and the pure, to our beloved Paul, who's gone to his eternal home. And merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. We know and we feel that his soul is bound up in the bond of all life, so he's with us in every breath we take. May he always rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. At this time, I want to open it up first to family members. And if the family members stop sharing, then I want to open it up to friends and everyone who's here. If you wanted to share just a short memory, a story, we'll try to keep it to about a minute per person so that anybody who would like to speak will have a turn. Please, when you're ready, just unmute yourself. And when you're done speaking, put yourself back on mute. Thank you.
Yeah, Rabbi, this is his brother Bruce. I would second everything you have said, and also what everybody has said about his kindness and the inspiration he gave us, especially when he gave such devotion and support to Helen during her trying times of her illness. But I also can't resist, especially as a lawyer, to give what I hope people don't take as a rebuttal argument. But you were talking about his love of performance in theater. I think my siblings and I can remember when he tried the violin for a number of years. Let's just say he was not Yitzhak Perlman, and my father, who loved violin music, went all over the city of Washington during his lunch hour to find a mute for his violin. And I can remember when we would hear the screeching downstairs and my father yelling up, "Paul, put that mute on the violin." And I also remember when he tried out for a play at Northwood High School and they gave him one line in the play. We heard that one line for over a month. I think I still know it. And then, of course, it was the time when Al and I were young kids, and he decided, boy, he had a little bit of power over us. So he made us in front of the TV clap with our feet, and then he fed us lunch, which was tuna fish salad made with peanut butter. So I thought I'd put a little bit of retort to some of these arguments. But again, I'm going to really miss my big brother. Thanks.
I just want to, this is Alan, the youngest and best looking of the brothers. First, I want to not only second everything, and I am particularly grateful for the eloquence of Lonnie. That was just spectacular. And I know the most important thing to Paul would be that people could smile and laugh today. So I just want to thank everyone for just an incredible turnout from coast to coast, north and south. It's unbelievable, and we all appreciate it. Thank you.
I guess a couple short things to say. I mean, I think the first thing I want to say is just sort of, if you look at just the people here, right? If everyone takes a second to sort of scroll through the list, I think it stands out to me both how many people I know and how many people I don't. I think that's a real tribute to the sort of man he was, where he would go and he'd meet and he'd help all sorts of people and they become sort of lifelong friends. I think one of the incredible things about him that I didn't realize to some degree until more recently, until after he died, is the messages of these incredible things people told us he went to do with each other, did for other people, sort of sacrifices he made, and how just utterly selfless he was. I mean, we knew that, but sort of just all the messages that came into our family was pretty incredible. He really was, I think, the kindest man I ever met. I think he was such a wonderful brother to my mother, especially whenever she was sort of going through something that was hard, he was always incredibly supportive. He would sacrifice anything for all of us, but I think especially for her. And I think it made a big difference. And so I just really look forward to things that the messages we got, I think, really helped us. And I think I really look forward to things people say, because he did so many kind things that I don't think I'm aware of. And I think that's a wonderful thing that you can never quite capture it, but he was just a very good man.
I hope you guys won't mind another lawyer speaking, but my dad and I share that in common. I'm Scott. I'm the oldest nephew of Uncle Paul. When I think about him, I'll think about many things, but the one thing that will stand out amongst everything else was the way he handled our Aunt Helen. It was often very intimidating as a young kid dealing with her disability and as she started to progress in the disease. And the one thing I always realized is when he would show up at the house with the van that had been converted to carry her, and it was just him taking her out of that van. And it was just him carrying her up the stairs. And it was just him making sure that we all knew how to say "I love you" in sign language, and always making her a part of it. And it's something that I'll always hold dear, is watching how that love was clear to everybody. And it's something that I hope we can all strive to always have in our lives with our loved ones. So thank you for that, Uncle Paul.
I'll go if no one else. My name's Pam, cousin Pam. First, I'd like to one of my first memories is of my mother, Roz, was very close with Bruce. I think she was, with Paul, excuse me. She considered him her personal toy, I was told, when he was born. And she took care of him. I think they were about 6 years apart. And I have a lot of fond memories of Paul, but one of the things that is in my life often, it's just an odd little thing, was he and Helen took me to Gallaudet to see a play. It was early on. I don't know if it was in the 70s or the 80s. And he taught me how to clap at Gallaudet, for people that can't hear, which is like this. And I have used that throughout my life to this day all the time, and have taught it to a ton of people. And actually, when I used to go to Grateful Dead shows a lot, we used to all do this together, which was our way of clapping and not making noise to get in anyone else's way. So anyway, I have a lot of fond memories, and I know if my mom were here, she would just want to say what a kind and loving man Paul was, and we will all miss him.
Guess I should say something.
My dad would like to say something.
Uh, You guys were really my family. My father and mother's family were much older, and I grew up with the Mendelssohns. And my wife Roz was closer to them. And Bruce, being the oldest, was
Paul.
Hmm?
Paul.
Paul. God, see what happens when you get old. The boys and Nina were great with us. They were our family, really. So I grew up with that family, Mendelsohn, the whole Mendelsohn family. And, I am shame that Rosie's not around, but
Say that number.
I appreciate having the chance to say something. Thank you, guys.
I wanted to open it up to everyone now.
I would like to say something about Paul. Paul has been my neighbor for 20 years. He was so wonderful. He was the dearest friend that I ever had. He was so caring. He was just wonderful. He was like a brother to me. During the pandemic, Nina, he made sure I had toilet paper. He had it sent from Maryland to my house. He was always there for me. He was the dearest person I ever met. And he spoke of his family all the time, and he loved all of you. He was amazing.
Hello, everybody.
Rabbi, this is David Herman. I'd like to say something about my friend Paul. I knew Paul now for almost 30 years. I think Lonnie mentioned what a religious man he was. And in fact, I met him at the Columbia Jewish Congregation for the first time. We both, were people that I think were seeking some sort of spiritual guidance and comfort. They say if a friend in need is a friend indeed. And I was a person in need, and he was indeed a friend. For all these years I knew him. One thing you may not know, we were very involved in the Havarat, the Columbia Jewish Congregation, and we both had the honor of being co-presidents of the sisterhood. They were a very progressive synagogue, and we provided kiddushes for them. Paul loved to cook, and he loved that. So I'm just remembering Paul as one of my best friends. Say who will ascend the mountain of the Lord? He with clean hands and a pure heart. And I would add, he with a big heart, because that was Paul. He had a big, big heart. And I'll always remember him and thank him for being my friend.
My name is Clark Munzer. From the book of Ruth, let your people be my people. Paul, as many of you know, came into the life of my family through my mother, Ruth, initially as her loyal companion in grief. But this support and care for her grew, as did hers for him, into a rare and remarkable relationship that eventually included her sister and her family, my own family, and my sister's family as well. This happened gradually and over the years, through times of celebration and sorrow. But whatever our joys and challenges, Paul was there, a great and dependable presence to guide us with his knowledge, his humor, and his infinite capacity for compassion. In fact, everything about Paul was capacious. His voice and gift for gab, his laugh, and his caring embrace. We all know that his greatest fault was his selflessness. But despite his best efforts, none of us will or could ever forget who he was. I miss him as a brother already, but take comfort that I can continue to feel his presence in my life as the pull of his goodness and love.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mark Cioli in Texas, one of the Texas cousins. Paul was a special person, as are all the Mendelsohn family to us. He would always make sure to come to our occasions in Texas, and the family connection late in life was and is considered special to us. Paul was as kind a man, and everyone has heard. And if there were more people like Paul, this world would be a better place. As he has left us, he left an example, as Lonnie so beautifully said. And it's not that hard, people. It's not that hard to be kind and special. Paul was that, and we love him. We love the Mendelsohns. Thanks.
Hey, everybody. This is Mary Beth Cioli, Hines, and Larry. And that was my brother, Mark. Thanks, Mark, for saying those kind words. We do want to echo how gracious of a man and so kind that Paul was. And we talk about him often, and he's always known as Paul Mendelsohn. It's Paul Mendelsohn, it's one word. And so we want to thank the family, the Mendelsohn family, for everything that you guys have meant to us, but especially Paul. He just was a great man. Larry and I remember traveling to Florida a couple years ago, and every time I see a turtle, every single time, I think of Paul. He'll be missed.
I'm Mary Ann Wilson. And yeah.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm Mary Ann Wilson, and I'm with neurofibromatosis, and we work together in the building of the local and the national organization. And of course, I want to emphasize his selflessness because of the many, many hours, both in the evening and even during the day and on weekends, that he devoted to neurofibromatosis. And he adopted our families too, our children too. And we so greatly appreciate that. But I remember in traveling with Helen and Paul, and I was with Helen going through the line at the airport, and the indignity that they put her through made me so angry. And I still am angry about it. But I was going back to tell him about it. And he said, just calm down. We're used to this. And he said that the fellow was just doing his job. Well, that did help to calm me down, but it also made me think, and even today, of the many difficult times that he did have, and he seemed to carry his burdens and the things that were said about him to himself. But what we learned over the years and working with him is that when we didn't hear from him in a while, then something must be wrong. And sure enough, we would later learn that Helen was in the hospital, or that his house had burned, or that there were other things that that had happened to him, but he never would tell us about it. And he was always putting other people first. And this is what we will, and our families will carry with us, is what he, the selfless life that he gave. And we're so glad to have known him for all of these years, and we will carry these marvelous memories with us. Thank you.
Amen.
I'd like to speak now. My name is Suzanne Bauman. I don't know if I'm coming through.
You are coming through.
Okay, thank you. I've got two different computers, so anyways, we are on the other coast, the West Coast, and Paul was our kind of adopted family member. My son had NF2, and we met Paul about 15 years ago in Vegas when all of the families got together. He came out every year, and he just took our son Garrett under his wings, and they became close, very, very close. He was the mentor, but when you say mentor, it was beyond mentorship. My son depended on Paul so much that he would call Paul in the middle. Well, he lost his voice, so he would text Paul in the middle of the night, all different hours of the day, just to get Paul's advice, just to hear from him. When he didn't hear from him, our son would blast Facebook going, "Where's Paul? Where's Paul?" Until Paul finally would call me and tell him to settle down. I'm on vacation, or, but they loved each other. We loved him. He invited our son to Florida to stay with him for a few days. I think it was a week. Garrett had never been away without us. And so this was his first flight across from California all the way to Florida. And Paul took him everywhere. He was so good to Garrett. He took him to Daytona. He took him to all the historical sites. And Garrett wasn't really thrilled with history and historical sites, but there was one person he really wanted to meet, this Navy guy that he had been chatting with on Facebook or his social media. But there was limited time, and Garrett had to get to the airport in Miami at first in the morning, but Garrett wanted to meet this guy in Pensacola. So Paul drove all the way to Pensacola so that he could meet this Navy guy in the evening. And then he drove Garrett through the night, Garrett sleeping in the back seat. He drove through the night to get Garrett to the airport on time. And Garrett loved it. We've got photos of it. He would call Paul or text Paul saying, "Mom's being mean again. Can you please, she doesn't let me do this or that or whatever." Paul would call me and said, "Suzanne, you're being mean old mom again. I promised Garrett I'd call." He would be laughing. We'd be laughing. Garrett just needed that mediator. He needed somebody that understood what he was going through. Garrett had a very intense diagnosis. He had the same suffering problems and issues that that Helen went through. And Paul had to see that again, which he was very, very strong, knowing what was in store for Garrett and for us. And he was there for Garrett. We invited him to a wedding. You may not know he had a harem over here in the West Coast. They were called the Samoan sisters. When he came to the wedding, excuse the cat, he sat at their table and he was dancing with them all night long. And he said, man, the Samoan sisters wore me out. And he laughed. It was just a joy. He was a wonderful man. He was part of our family. Unfortunately, Gary did pass a year and a half ago, and I know it hurt Paul, and he had to relive that again, but he was there for us even afterwards, and we just loved Paul, adored him, and just want to thank the family for sharing him with us. He was a great man. Thank you.
Rabbi has something to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Walt Sanders from Annandale, Virginia, and I have worked with Mary Ann Wilson for many years in the NF organization and with Paul. And I want to thank you on behalf of NF2 for all the devotion that Paul had put into the NF organization. But I have a story to tell about Paul. I also raise money for the Children's Tumor Foundation. I'm an NF patient. My daughter, Melissa, has NF, and we put together a fundraiser for the Children's Tumor Foundation that involved running and walking. There's a run-walk race. And I said, oh, let's invite Paul. So I gave Paul a call, and the first question he asked me is Melissa going to participate? And I said, of course she's going to participate. And he said, well, I'll be there. And he showed up. And anybody that knows Paul knows that he really doesn't fit the image of a runner. And but he was there, and he showed up in his running outfit and participated. And Melissa was a little bit slow on the uptake, but Paul was out there running on the trail and walking and encouraging Melissa to keep going. And he was so inspirational that it was incredible to have him there and to have his words of inspiration for that event. And so that's the one thing and the memory that I will have about Paul is his devotion and his inspiration to others to move forward and to keep going. And so I just wanted to add that story. And Paul has just been a wonderful, wonderful addition and a wonderful part of the organization. And Melissa will carry the memories of Paul as will I. But thank you very much for the service you've put together, Rabbi. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who?
Hi. This is Rebecca Citrin. I just wanted to say a few words also. Clark is my cousin, and Paul really became a part of our family. I guess it was after Helen died. My Aunt Ruth lost her husband, and they met at the synagogue. So as we're meeting all these people that were part of his life, then Paul became really a very integral part of our family. It's almost amazing for me to think that he could have been part of so many different families because he devoted so much attention and love and ours. The one thing I wanted to say about Paul is his optimism. He had it so difficult the last few years. It was very sad. But whenever you called him, the first thing he says is, well, I'm doing better now. And then you realized how he hadn't been doing well, but he was always so optimistic about everything. It was just such a pleasure to talk to him, and you never knew how hard everything must have been for him the last couple of years. He devoted so much love and attention to my Aunt Ruth, extended her life. And then after my dad died, My mother inherited Paul. My mother would come down to Florida for the winter season, and he was there almost every night to make sure that she had somebody to be with. Took her to the movies, took her to dinner, booked her on every show. And his travel club, he made sure that she was part of it, and he was just always there for her. So we will miss him dearly. He was very special, and it's wonderful to hear all the other people that he had an impact on. It's just heartwarming. So he will be missed.
I think that one of the things that hasn't been discussed is the depth of intellect that Paul had. He could speak with knowledge on almost any subject. He frequently knew facts and things that I hadn't read about. He was one of the best read people I've ever known, in addition to being a very smart guy, a very bright guy, and a fantastic conversationalist on any intellectual subject or any comedy or any subject at all. There are very few people who have the ability to be able to be culture brokers and be able to talk on all sorts of levels. And he surely was one of those, and clearly the kindest. Turn this on.
Is there anyone else who wants to share before we close?
I'd like to. I don't know if I'm going to show up on the screen or not, but I was Lonnie's singing teacher from the time she was 10 until she went away to college. Lonnie brought Paul to me because he was involved in a musical, which my daughter and I ended up being involved with too. And I just want to say that, Lonnie, that was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. I think you inherited a lot of Uncle Paul, a lot. There really isn't much else I can say. Our time together was very short, and but I feel I know him a lot more now from all of the sharing that's been going on. The Kowarskis have always treated me like a family member, and that I can't even begin to say how wonderful that is. And Lonnie, we got to go to lunch sometime. Thank you all.
Definitely.
Ben, did you want to say something? I saw you raised your hand.
Hi, I will say something. Howard Tepper. My sister just spoke.
Ben, I think you just muted yourself.
Somebody must have unmuted. Uh-oh.
Okay, how about now?
There we go, maybe.
Better.
Better. Let's see if I can figure out how to look at the camera here.
Look over here.
Lifelong childhood friend of David's. First met Nita when they were dating. So longtime friend of the family. Mostly I knew Paul as a guest for the Kowarski household. And Paul was a formidable guest. But Laurie and I got to see the host side of Paul one time when we were down in Boynton Beach, and the real generosity of his soul came through. I had also a brief sojourn with Paul as a roommate at an APAC conference. And that was memorable. Everything that I've heard today rings absolutely true, and Paul will be greatly missed. Thank you.
I'd like to add a few words if I may. Okay. I'm Garrick Mail. I'm a good friend of Paul's. I consider myself a good friend of Paul. I'd first like to thank everybody for their reminiscences of Paul. I had realized what a good person he was, and I think this fleshes out the skeleton, as it were. One of the enduring legends of Judaism is one of the Lamed Wuf, the 36 just men and women. These are people who are unknown, go through life unknown, but the power of the world is invested in them. If one of them should pass away, the world would be destroyed. I somehow feel that Paul is one of those Lamed Wuf, a very good, kind, wise man who never makes a big to-do about himself. Paul is a mensch, that Yiddish word which means human being, but he embodied the finest qualities of a mensch. Thank you.
I'd like to say a few words.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Howard Tepper. I'll just pick up where my cousin George left off, because it really rings true when you talk about the Lamed Vav mix, the 36 holy people. I think we were all blessed to know Paul. And as my sister said, I've had this feeling, certainly I wouldn't call Paul a friend, he was family. And we did have this feeling, how does he have the capacity to have more family besides us? Because he took such interest, care, love, and devotion with all of us. You know, little example, if I would go down to Florida, he would say, I'll pick you up at the airport. You want to stay at my apartment? You know what? Don't rent a car. Take my car. I mean, the man could not give more than, you know, than there was. When we talk about the travel club, he once went and my mother was with him. They were going, I think they stopped in Puerto Rico. She had forgotten her passport. Paul had to get off the ship they were on and spend 3 days in Puerto Rico with my mother, leaving his, you know, his own vacation, the other people that he had organized to be with her. And when we always knew if Paul was around, we felt safe. I'll miss his embrace, his smile, and whenever I would see him, I would just feel good. It is said the world stands on three pillars: Torah, service, and acts of loving kindness. And as Lonnie so beautifully got him, without him, we're going to all have to work harder. We'll miss him. Thank you.
I'd like to say a few words about Paul.
Yes.
My wife and I are neighbors of Paul. We live right behind him in Boynton Beach. Paul was a great asset to our community. He was great with Milt, which we are both members of, which is the little theater group. We also traveled with Paul many times. One of the stories that we're going to like to repeat about Paul. We went on a trip to Hawaii. Roberta and I got on a wrong train in Atlanta and missed the plane. We had to get on the next plane next day. Paul worried so much about it, he kept calling and calling and calling. Where are we? How are we? When are we going to be there? And we always appreciate that. Paul was a great friend of ours, and he would be really, very well missed in the Boynton Beach community of Majestic Isles. Thank you.
A couple of funny things, small things, but funny, very rememberable.
Go ahead, Roberta, keep going.
We met in one of the shows, and there was a certain song in the show that Paul used as an audition for something. I don't remember what now, but he always reminded me that that was my audition. Well, somehow he connected that song with me, and every time we would see each other, no matter how many people were around, he'd start singing the song to me. And it was really funny. And as far as his turtles that somebody mentioned before, we collected snails. And if he saw a snail, he'd get it for us. And if we saw a turtle, we would get it for him. And that was cute, funny little things to remember.
What was the song?
I don't remember.
Oh, no. Oh, well.
Someday I hope to. I just don't remember right now. But it was funny.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Larry Cody. I'm Ruth Munzer's grandson-in-law, I guess. So I met Paul through Ruth. And Lonnie, I can't tell you everything. Every adjective you used to describe your uncle was just spot on. When Rabbi Shapiro made the comment about Paul cooking dinner for his aides, I kind of burst out laughing, saying, of course he did, because that was truly Paul. Several years back, we took a guys trip. It was Paul, myself, my brother-in-law Gildo, and George Mel to Breckenridge, Colorado. And surprising to us, but it was a fantastic surprise, is that we landed in Breckenridge in the middle of Oktoberfest. And Paul and George were tagging along with two guys who were acting like they were still in college and fully embraced the moment and had just a fantastic time. And I won't say too much more because we all agreed that what happened in Breckenridge would stay in Breckenridge. But I can confirm that Paul, while we were fly fishing, did take an unexpected swim in the stream and got a healthy dose of cold mountain water in his waders, which we thoroughly enjoyed. So thank you so much for letting me participate in such a wonderful remembrance of such a great guy. Thank you.
Hello, is anybody just free to speak, or are we going in order here? My name is Rick. Is it okay to speak?
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you, Rabbi. Hey, my name is Rick Mazer, and I hadn't talked to Paul in quite a while since he retired from CMS, aka HICFA, and I'm not sure if there's anybody else on here from HICFA or CMS, but I knew Paul. He was working in the division next to me where I was working, where I was sitting in the South building, and always was a very jovious, very happy young man. And I use the word young because he was always young, boisterous, in a very positive way. Very, very, very nice guy. And he was definitely a presence at the workplace. Everything, you'd be working along the way, everybody doing their own thing. And Paul was like one aisle and one section back from me. He was basically right next to the window, with seniority and all that. He was able to get himself a nice window spot in the South building. So you'd be working, doing your own thing. And all of a sudden you would hear, and you would stop working. And you would hear that beautiful voice and that laugh. And I don't know what he was laughing about, but it always would just brighten your day. You think, oh, there's Paul. He's in the office today. And definitely one dynamic individual. You would say hi to him once a day, go up to his desk. And, the interesting thing about his desk near the window is that he found a place for every single one of his combined federal campaign little trophies, eagles, prints, whatever he had on the wall on his desk. We were just always mesmerized on how much he supported that campaign each year. I remember too, upon his retirement, he reflected on all those people he touched his lives over 10 years ago at CMS. He even remembered those who passed. There was a gentleman who actually died from a stroke days right before the 9/11 attacks. His name was Joe Slattery, and he was very moved by him. Joe and I also were collectors of different items, and that's how Joe and I connected. But he was very fond he was very fond of Joe as well. Wonderful experience. He also spoke of a guy named Tim, forget Tim's last name, who just passed away before Paul retired himself. He got very emotional. Of course, he spoke very highly about his wife, his late wife. But he was a very, very touching man. And I'll be honest with you, I never saw Paul get upset, but I know a couple of times he may have actually got upset. And I'm telling you, when he got upset, if you hit him the wrong way, you would know it. He wouldn't get violent, but he was always expressing himself, even if he was mad. And you knew it. And you're like, oh, okay, Paul, I get where you're coming from, just as human as you and I are. And I remember seeing Paul in his play performances up here in the Reisterstown, Owings Mills area. He would tell people he was going to be in a play. People would come to the play. They would bring their kids. My wife and I went several times, and he did an awesome job. He put his heart and soul into the performance. And he's very unique. You're never going to see, there aren't too many people like him left in the world, especially, from his generation. And it's definitely a major loss, I think, to this world. And not only to family members, but also to friends. So I know he's, me being the way I am, he's with his wife, with all the loved ones. He's not alone. And I know that, he will always be loved and remembered for a long time to come. So God bless you, Paul. God bless the family. And my best and my condolences to you all. And that's it.
Is there anyone else who wants to share before we close with the Mourner's Kaddish? I think this is such a incredible dedication to you, Paul. I know you're watching, and I hope this lets you see a window to the way you were viewed by so many who were in your orbit, and how many lives you touched, and how we feel so strongly about the person you were and your soul. And you should just be so proud and smile down on all of us. So we're going to honor him with the Mourner's Kaddish. I'm going to ask everyone to unmute themselves if you're able to, and we can all say that together. If you know it. Otherwise, just listen. Yiskadal, Yiskadash, Shemei
Amen.
V'alma
Divra, Yeruzeh, V'yamli, Achusei, V'chaye Chon, Ov Yomei Chon, Ov Chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael,
Hagala Uvizman Karid V'Yimru Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Am Omei Omaya Yisparach Yishtabach Yispa'ar Yisramam Yisnaseh Yisadar Yisalel Hey Dukudisha Barichu Ba'ela Bin Kol Birchasa V'Shirasa Tushbachasa V'Nechemasa Damira Dama Yivru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemayu V'chayim Aleinu Ve'al Yisrael Yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom Livramav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Uyat shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'emeru. Yat shalom, yat shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yat shalom, yat shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yat shalom, yat shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yat shalom, yat shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al
all together now. Yeah.
Imeru. Amen.
Well, he's not the rabbi at
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, son.
I'm going to post the service on YouTube fairly soon. So if there's someone you know that would want to see it, you can reach out to Paul's family and they can give you the link to the service on YouTube. But everyone just stick together and let's live our lives like Paul would have lived every single day. Let's bring that into our lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.